A spilled drink usually costs a waitress her tip, but for Ophelia Bennett, a single interruption cost a billionaire his entire worldview. It was a Tuesday night at New York's most exclusive restaurant when Desmond Hawthorne, the titan of the tech world, was watching his $100 million merger burn to the ground. His team of Ivy League executives was helpless. The solution wasn't in their expensive laptops. It was in the mind of the invisible woman refilling their water glasses. She fixed in 30 seconds what they couldn't fix in 3 months. But when you humiliate powerful men, you don't just get a promotion, you get a target on your back. The sound of a hand slamming against the mahogany table echoed through L'Obsidian, Manhattan's most notoriously exclusive dining establishment. The sound was sharp, violent, and expensive. "It is a brick!" Desmond Hawthorne roared. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the terrifying, cold weight of a man who controlled 40% of the global cloud computing market. "We are 48 hours away from the volatility lock on the Kensington merger, and the entire logistical mainframe is a brick. Tell me, Bradford, why am I paying you $3 million a year?" Ophelia Bennett tightened her grip on the silver water pitcher. She was standing 6 feet away, blending into the shadows of the private dining room's velvet curtains. Rule number 1 of L'Obsidian: the staff does not exist unless summoned. At the table sat the high command of Hawthorne Dynamics. In the center was Desmond Hawthorne himself, dark hair, sharper eyes, wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than Ophelia's father had made in his lifetime. To his right was Bradford Halloway, the chief technology officer, a man whose forehead was currently glistening with a cold, terrified sweat. "It's a kernel panic, Dom," Bradford stammered, tapping furiously on a military-grade tablet. "It's the legacy code from the acquisition. The Japanese servers aren't shaking hands with our encryption. We've got the best guys on it. My team in Bangalore has been up for 3 days." "Your team in Bangalore is useless," Desmond said, leaning back, his eyes dead with disappointment. "And you are useless. If that handshake fails when the market opens on Monday, the stock tanks. We lose the Kensington deal. I lose $100 million in liquidity, and the board votes me out. Fix it." "I'm trying," Bradford snapped, his arrogance cracking under pressure. "It's an impossible loop. The logic is circular. It's mathematically unsolvable without rewriting the core architecture, which takes months." Ophelia stepped forward to refill Desmond's glass. She moved with the silent grace of a ghost. She had been working at L'Obsidian for 6 months, hiding in plain sight. With her hair pulled back in a severe bun and the shapeless uniform, she was nobody. Just a pair of hands pouring sparkling water. But as she leaned over, her eyes darted to the tablet screen Bradford had thrown onto the table in frustration. She saw the code. It wasn't just lines of text to her. It was music. It was a structure, and it was broken. She recognized the script immediately. It was written in a modified version of Rust, specifically a dialect used for high-frequency trading. She scanned the error log. Error 4043, semaphore timeout. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She knew this bug. She didn't just know it. She had written a paper on this specific asynchronous deadlock vulnerability when she was 19, before her life had imploded, before the scandal that stripped her of her name and her future. "Don't do it, Ophelia," she told herself. "You are a waitress. You need this job. You need the tips to pay for your mother's care facility." "More water, sir?" she asked softly. Desmond didn't even look at her. He just waved a dismissive hand. "Get out. Leave the bottle. We need privacy." Ophelia nodded and turned to leave. But then Bradford spoke again, his voice whining. "Dom, listen to me. It's the hardware. The latency in the trans-Pacific cables is causing the semaphore to time out. We need to delay the launch. Delay is death! Desmond slammed the table again. Ophelia stopped. She couldn't help it. The stupidity was physically painful. It wasn't the hardware. It was a race condition in the priority queue. The system was trying to read the data before it had finished writing it, because the timestamp protocol was set to local time, not UTC. She turned around. "It's not the cables," she said. The silence that followed was absolute. 5 men in $5,000 suits turned to look at the waitress. Bradford Halloway looked at her like she was a cockroach on his plate. "Excuse me." Ophelia felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she didn't retreat. She had spent 2 years scrubbing floors and serving rich idiots, suppressing the genius IQ that had once made her the youngest doctoral candidate at MIT. She was tired of being invisible. "It's not the cables," Ophelia repeated, her voice steadying. "And it's not an impossible loop. It's a race condition in your timestamp protocol. You're prioritizing the read request before the write request is fully committed." Desmond Hawthorne slowly turned his head. For the first time, he actually saw her. He looked at her hands, red from washing dishes, then up to her face, noting the intelligence burning behind her hazel eyes. "What did you just say?" Desmond asked, his voice dangerously low. "She's drunk!" Bradford scoffed, standing up. "Manager, get this woman out of here immediately." "Sit down, Brad," Desmond commanded, not taking his eyes off Ophelia. "Let her finish." "Dom, she's a waitress," Bradford laughed nervously. She probably heard the word protocol on a TV show. This is classified proprietary code. He turned to Ophelia, his face twisting into a sneer. "Listen, sweetheart. Stick to fetching the wine. The adults are talking about billion-dollar problems." Ophelia ignored him. She looked straight at Desmond. "You're running a distributed ledger, right? The error log shows a semaphore timeout. That means 2 processes are fighting for the same resource. Your CTO thinks it's latency. It's not. It's logic. The Japanese servers are sending the confirmation based on Tokyo time, and your New York servers are rejecting it because they think the data is from the future due to the time zone differential in the metadata." Desmond's eyes widened slightly. Bradford looked like he had swallowed a lemon. That's ridiculous. The system converts to UTC automatically." "Does it?" Ophelia challenged. "Or did you override the default library to shave off 3 milliseconds of latency? Because if you did that, you bypassed the time zone conversion." The room went dead silent. Bradford went pale. That was exactly what he had done. He had ordered the optimization personally to hit a performance bonus target last quarter. "Give her the tablet," Desmond said. "Dom, you cannot be serious," Bradford protested. "This is a security breach. Give her the tablet." Bradford slid the device across the table with trembling hands. Ophelia picked it up. It felt heavy, familiar. It had been 3 years since she had touched a compiler. Her fingers danced across the virtual keyboard. She didn't need to rewrite the architecture. She just needed to inject a wait command, a simple mutex lock that forced the system to convert the timestamp before executing the read. She worked for 45 seconds. The room watched in stunned silence. The only sound was the tapping of her fingernails on the glass screen. "Done," she said, placing the tablet in front of Desmond. "I added a 3-line patch to the handshake module. Run the simulation." Desmond looked at the code. He was a coder before he was a CEO, and he recognized the elegance of the script immediately. He pressed the blue Compile button. The screen flashed. A progress bar appeared. Compiling, linking, testing connection to Tokyo node. Bradford crossed his arms. "It's going to crash, and when it does, I'm suing this restaurant for corporate sabotage." Connection established. Latency, 42 meters. Packet loss, 0%. Sync complete. Green text flooded the screen. The error was gone. The $100 million merger was live. Desmond stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he looked up at Ophelia. "Who are you?" he asked. "Just the waitress," Ophelia said. She smoothed her apron. "I'll bring the check." She turned and walked out of the private room, leaving 5 stunned executives in her wake. But she knew, as the heavy door clicked shut behind her, that she hadn't just fixed a bug. She had started a war. Ophelia barely made it to the kitchen before her hand started shaking. The adrenaline crash hit her hard. She leaned against the stainless steel counter, taking deep breaths of the air that smelled of truffle oil and dish soap. Stupid, 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 she chided herself. You just exposed yourself. People like Desmond Hawthorne don't just let things go. "Ophelia!" The sharp voice of Henri, the restaurant manager, snapped her to attention. He was a small, angry man who treated the staff like cattle. He was storming toward her, his face purple with rage. Behind him, looking smug and vicious, was Bradford Halloway. "Get your things," Henry spat. "You are fired. Immediately." Ophelia stood up straight. "On what grounds?" "Harassing the VIPs," Bradford interjected, stepping into the kitchen. He looked out of place among the steam and the line cooks, his expensive Italian leather shoes slipping slightly on the greasy floor. "You compromised a confidential business meeting. I've already called security." "I fixed your problem," Ophelia said coldly. "You were about to lose the merger." "You got lucky," Bradford hissed, stepping closer, invading her personal space. "You mashed some keys and got a false positive. But I won't have a servant humiliating me in front of the board. You're done, and if you ever breathe a word about what you saw on that screen, I will bury you under so many NDAs you won't be able to get a job at a gas station." He was terrified. Ophelia realized it instantly. He knew she was right, and he knew that if Desmond realized a waitress was smarter than his CTO, Bradford's days were numbered. He needed her gone before Desmond asked any more questions. "Get out!" Henry shouted, pointing to the back alley door. "Don't even clock out. Just go!" Ophelia untied her apron. She didn't cry. She had lost more than this. She had lost her reputation, her fiancé, and her research 3 years ago. Losing a waitress job was nothing. "Fine," she said. She threw the apron into the laundry bin. "The risotto on table 4 is getting cold, by the way." She grabbed her coat and pushed past Bradford. He caught her arm. "Who sent you?" he whispered aggressively. "Was it Tech Corp? Are you a spy?" "Let go of me," Ophelia warned. "Tell me who you work for." Bradford squeezed harder. "She works for me." The voice came from the kitchen entrance, deep, resonant, and calm. Desmond Hawthorne was standing there. He had removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie. He looked entirely at ease in the chaotic kitchen, a predator entering a new hunting ground. Bradford released Ophelia's arm as if it were red-hot iron. "Dom, I was just handling the security breach. I'm escorting her out." "You're firing her?" Desmond asked, walking forward. The line cooks stopped cooking. The dishwashers stopped scrubbing. The entire kitchen froze. "She looked at proprietary data, Dom. It's protocol." Desmond stopped in front of Ophelia. He was tall, well over 6 feet, towering over her. But he didn't look at her with the disdain he showed his executives. He looked at her with intense curiosity. "Did you write the Valkyrie patch?" Desmond asked abruptly. Ophelia froze. Her heart stopped. I don't know what you're talking about." 3 years ago, the Valkyrie patch for the open-source quantum library. It revolutionized data compression. The user handle was anon88, but the syntax was identical to the code you just wrote on my tablet. The way you nest your loops, it's a signature. Ophelia looked away. I'm just a waitress, Mr. Hawthorne. No, Desmond said, stepping closer. You are definitely not. And Bradford is right about one thing. You are fired. Bradford smirked triumphantly. See, I told you she was trouble. You are fired from this restaurant, Desmond corrected, keeping his eyes on Ophelia. Because you are hired by Hawthorne Dynamics, starting now. What? Bradford choked. Dom, you can't be serious. Look at her. She's service staff. She doesn't have a degree. She hasn't been vetted. I'm offering you a position as a senior systems architect, Desmond said to Ophelia, ignoring his CTO completely. Salary is $300,000 a year, plus stock options, plus a signing bonus equal to whatever you would have made here in 10 years. Ophelia looked at him. It was the lifeline she had been praying for. But it was also a trap. If she went back into the tech world, her past would dig itself up. The people who destroyed her life before would find her. I can't, she whispered. Why? Desmond asked. Because he will make my life hell, she gestured to Bradford. Desmond turned to Bradford. Brad, give me your access badge. Excuse me, your security badge, and your phone, and your company car keys. Dom, what are you doing? Bradford's voice pitched up an octave. I'm firing you, Desmond said simply. You tried to cover up your incompetence by blaming hardware. Then you tried to bully the person who fixed your mess. I don't tolerate incompetence, and I don't tolerate liars. You're out, effective immediately. The kitchen gasped. Desmond turned back to Ophelia and held out a hand. The position of CTO is currently vacant. I'm not offering it to you yet. You have to earn that. But I am offering you a chance to prove you're the smartest person in the room. Are you taking it, or are you going to walk out that back door and disappear? Ophelia looked at the back door. It led to the alley, to the subway, to her small, cold apartment, and a life of hiding. Then she looked at Desmond's hand. She took it. My name is Ophelia, she said, and your encryption keys for the merger are outdated. I'll need to update them before midnight. Desmond smiled. It was the first time he had smiled all night. Let's get to work. As they walked out of the kitchen together, leaving a stunned Bradford Halloway shouting impotently at the stainless steel ovens, Ophelia knew the real danger wasn't over. It was just beginning. Bradford wasn't just a CTO. He was the nephew of Senator William Halloway, one of the most powerful men in Washington. And he wasn't the type to forgive a humiliation like this. Ophelia had just fixed a $100 million problem, but she had created a $1 billion enemy. Monday morning at Hawthorne Dynamics was less like a corporate office and more like a battlefield during a ceasefire. The headquarters, a 60-story glass needle piercing the Manhattan skyline, hummed with the anxiety of 1,000 employees who knew their jobs depended on the next 6 hours. Ophelia walked through the lobby doors wearing a suit Desmond had his assistant send to her apartment at 5 a.m. It was charcoal grey, perfectly tailored, and armoured her against the stairs. She wasn't invisible anymore. The security guard scanned her temporary badge, his eyebrows shooting up when the screen flashed. Priority level. Alpha. That was Desmond's clearance level. When the elevator doors opened on the 60th floor, the executive suite, the silence was deafening. The open-plan area was populated by the Gold Team, the elite coders who reported directly to the CTO. Currently, they were leaderless, and they were staring at the woman who had decapitated their boss. So this is her, a voice sneered. Ophelia turned to see a woman leaning against a server rack. She had sharp features and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. The waitress savant. I'm Ophelia, she said, extending a hand. The woman didn't take it. I'm Sarah Jenkins, lead back-end engineer. I worked with Bradford for 6 years. You might have charmed Desmond with a parlour trick, but don't expect us to roll over. We know the code base. You don't. I know enough to know that your encryption keys are utilizing a deprecated Esche-1 hashing algorithm, Ophelia said, her voice calm, but projecting across the room. She pointed to the massive monitor wall displaying the system metrics. If you don't update to Esche-256 before the market opens in 30 minutes, the Kensington merger data will be intercepted by botnets before it even hits the fiber optics. Sarah scoffed. Esche-1 is fine for internal transfers. It's not an internal transfer anymore, Ophelia countered, walking past her to the main terminal. We are bridging with an external entity. You're leaving the back door unlocked because it's convenient. Don't touch that, Sarah shouted, as Ophelia sat in the leather chair usually reserved for the CTO. Let her work. Desmond Hawthorne walked out of his office. He looked like he hadn't slept, but his energy was electric. He stood behind Ophelia's chair, his presence a heavy weight that silenced the room. Sarah, if Ophelia says update the hash, you update the hash. But Dom, Sarah protested, rehashing the database takes an hour. The market opens in 20 minutes. We'll miss the window. No, Ophelia typed furiously, her fingers a blur. It takes an hour if you do it sequentially. I'm going to parallel process it, using the GPU clusters from the render farm. That's reckless, Sarah hissed. You'll overheat the cores. Watch, Ophelia said. She hit enter. The screens on the wall turned from idle blue to a furious, processing orange. The hum of the cooling fans in the server room down the hall rose to a jet engine whine. The progress bar sprinted across the screen. 20%, 50%, 80%. Temperature critical, a computerized voice warned. Abort! Sarah yelled. You're going to melt the mainframe. Ophelia didn't blink. She kept her eyes on the thermal readouts. She knew the hardware limits of the Hawthorne cooling systems better than the people who bought them, because she had read the schematics on the bus ride over. Hold, she whispered. The temperature gauge hit the red zone. 95%. 98%. Ophelia, Desmond warned, his hand gripping the back of her chair. 100%. Hash update complete. Cooling systems engaging. The fans spun down. The screens turned a calm, solid green. The clock on the wall struck 9:30 a.m. The stock market bell rang. Link established, Ophelia announced, leaning back. The merger is secure. No leaks, no latency. A cheer erupted from the junior devs, but Sarah and the senior staff stayed silent. They looked at Ophelia with a mixture of awe and pure, unadulterated hatred. Desmond leaned down, his mouth close to her ear. Impressive, but reckless. I like reckless. He straightened up and addressed the room. Good work, everyone. Jenkins, get the logs to legal. Ophelia, my office. Now. Ophelia followed him into the sanctum. His office was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city she used to feel crushed by. Now, she was looking down on it. Desmond sat on the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. The playful admiration was gone, replaced by the cold scrutiny of a CEO. "Who are you really, Ophelia?" he asked. "I ran a background check. Ophelia Bennett doesn't exist before 3 years ago. No tax records, no address, no degree. You popped into existence working at a diner in Queens." Ophelia felt the cold shiver of her past crawling up her spine. "I told you, I'm just someone who knows code." "Don't lie to me," Desmond said, his voice dropping. "I trusted you with my company today. I fired a man with powerful political connections for you. I need to know who I'm protecting, because Bradford Halloway isn't going to go quietly. He's already leaking stories to the press that I've lost my mind and hired a homeless woman to run my tech." "Let him talk," Ophelia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The results speak for themselves." "They do," Desmond admitted. He walked over to her, stopping inches away. The air between them crackled with a tension that wasn't just professional. But I have a rule, Ophelia. Total transparency. If there is a skeleton in your closet, bring it out now, because if I find it later, I won't be as forgiving. Ophelia looked into his eyes that were starting to look at her with more than just professional interest. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to tell him that she was Dr. Ophelia Vost, the prodigy whose research was stolen by her fiancé, who was then framed for academic fraud and blacklisted from every university in the world. But she couldn't. If she admitted who she was, the scandal would attach itself to Hawthorne Dynamics. The stock would tank. She would be a liability. There's nothing, she lied. I'm just a dropout who got good at self-study. Desmond studied her face for a long, agonizing second. Then he nodded, though he didn't look convinced. Fine, he said. Get ready. The merger celebration gala is on Friday. You're coming as my guest of honor. We're going to introduce the world to the new VP of Innovation. VP? Ophelia gasped. You earned it, Desmond said, moving back to his desk. Now go buy a dress, something that says, I own this place. Ophelia walked out, her heart soaring, but her gut twisting. She was climbing the ladder, but she was doing it on a foundation of lies, and she had a feeling Friday night was going to be a disaster. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a sea of black ties, diamonds, and champagne. It was the kind of wealth that made the air feel thin. Ophelia stood at the top of the marble staircase, her hand trembling slightly on the railing. She wore a gown of emerald green silk that clung to her figure and pooled at her feet. Her hair was down, cascading in waves, and for the first time in years, she felt beautiful. But she also felt like an imposter. Desmond waited for her at the bottom of the stairs. When he saw her, he stopped mid-conversation with a Japanese investor. His eyes locked onto her, and for a moment, the room disappeared. He offered his arm as she descended. You look... Desmond paused, searching for the word. Dangerous. Is that a compliment? Ophelia smiled nervously. In my world, the highest one. They moved through the crowd, a power couple in the making. Desmond introduced her to senators, tech moguls and celebrities. Ophelia held her own, discussing algorithmic complexity with the CEO of Google and market trends, with the treasurer of New York. She was dazzling. She was perfect. She was happy. And then the ice water hit. Ophelia. The voice came from behind them, near the champagne fountain. A voice she hadn't heard in 3 years. A voice that used to whisper, I love you, before it testified against her in a disciplinary hearing. She turned slowly. Standing there, holding a martini, was Gavin Cross. He looked exactly the same, handsome, polished, and utterly soulless. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than her parents' house, and standing next to him, with a smirk that looked like a jagged wound, was Bradford Halloway. Gavin, Ophelia breathed, the blood draining from her face. Desmond stiffened. He felt the shift in her energy immediately. You know this man? Gavin stepped forward, a shark smelling blood. Know her? Desmond, old friend, I was engaged to her, although back then she went by Dr. Ophelia Vost. The name dropped like a bomb. Several people nearby turned their heads. The name Ophelia Vost was infamous in the tech world, the cautionary tale of a Reese Hawthorne who supposedly faked her data and plagiarized her professor's work. Desmond's hand dropped from Ophelia's waist. He looked at her, confusion warring with recognition. Vost? The fraud case from MIT? She didn't tell you? Bradford Halloway laughed, stepping in. Oh, this is rich. Dom, you fired me to hire the most disgraced academic in the last decade. She's not a genius, She's a con artist. She probably stole that code she used on Monday, too. I didn't steal anything. Ophelia's voice shook, but she found her fire. Gavin stole my research. He put his name on my paper and used his father's lawyers to silence me. Gavin took a sip of his drink, looking bored. Ophelia, darling, we went through this in court. You lost. You're a liability. And honestly, Desmond, I'm surprised at you. Didn't you vet her? Or were you too distracted by the waitress uniform? The insult hung in the air. Desmond looked at Ophelia. His expression was unreadable, a mask of stone. Is it true? Are you Ophelia Vost? Yes, she whispered. But I'm innocent, Desmond. You have to believe me. The code I wrote for you, that was mine. It's always been mine. You lied to me, Desmond said. His voice was quiet, but it hurt more than if he had shouted. I asked you explicitly on Monday. I gave you a chance to come clean. I was scared, she pleaded. I knew if I told you, you wouldn't hire me. So you manipulated me, Desmond said. He stepped back, creating a physical distance between them. The warmth was gone. The connection was severed. I can't have a known fraudster as my VP, Ophelia. The shareholders would revolt. Desmond, please! Ophelia reached out. Don't, he said coldly. Bradford, Gavin, excuse us. I have a company to run. He turned and walked away into the crowd, leaving Ophelia standing alone in the center of the ballroom. The whispers started immediately. Hundreds of eyes bored into her. Bradford leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and victory. I told you I'd bury you. Enjoy the unemployment line, Doctor. Although, I hear L'Obsidienne is hiring dishwashers. Ophelia fought back the tears. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She lifted her chin, turned on her heel, and walked out of the gala with as much dignity as she could muster. But inside, she was broken. She hadn't just lost the job. She had lost Desmond, and for the first time, she realized she had fallen in love with him. The following week was a blur of misery. Ophelia was formally terminated via email on Monday morning. Her access badge was deactivated. Her phone was remotely wiped of all company data. She was back in her tiny apartment, staring at the peeling paint on the ceiling. She expected to feel relief. The hiding was over. But she only felt a burning need to fix things, not for the job, but for her name. On Wednesday night, her personal laptop, an old, battered machine, pinged. It was a generic notification from a news aggregator. Breaking. Hawthorne Dynamics accuses former employee of massive data breach. User logs show Ophelia Bennett accessed confidential blueprints hours before termination. No, Ophelia gasped, sitting up. She opened the article. It claimed that gigabytes of data regarding the new Project Ether, a revolutionary drone technology, had been uploaded to a server in the Cayman Islands. The IP address was traced to Ophelia's login. Bradford, she hissed. It was the perfect frame job. He didn't just want her fired, he wanted her in prison. If she was convicted of corporate espionage, she was looking at 20 years. She couldn't stay here. The police would be coming any minute. Ophelia grabbed her laptop and a burner phone she kept for emergencies and ran out the door into the rainy New York night. She needed a safe place with Wi-Fi. She ducked into a 24-hour internet cafe in Chinatown, pulling her hood up. She had to hack back into Hawthorne Dynamics. It was the only way to prove the logs were doctored. But as she initiated the handshake with the Hawthorne server, she saw something that made her blood freeze. The leak wasn't just a frame job. It was real. Someone was stealing the data. But it wasn't just being sent to the Cayman Islands. It was being mirrored to a private server owned by Cross Industries. Gavin Cross. Bradford hadn't just teamed up with Gavin to humiliate her. They were working together to strip Desmond's company for parts. Gavin was stealing the tech to launch a competitor product, and Bradford was holding the door open from the inside, using credentials he must have stolen before he left. And the worst part, they were using a polymorphic virus that was eating the system from the inside out. By the time Desmond realized what was happening, the backups would be corrupted. Hawthorne Dynamics would be bankrupt within 48 hours. Ophelia stared at the screen. Desmond had fired her. He had humiliated her. He believed she was a liar. She owed him nothing. But she remembered the look in his eyes when she saved the merger. She remembered the way he defended her in the kitchen. "Damn it," she muttered. She couldn't fix this from the outside. The firewall was too strong. She needed physical access to the mainframe. She needed to get back into the building that she was banned from. She checked her watch. It was 2 a.m. She knew the service entrance schedule. She knew the shift change for the guards. Ophelia closed her laptop. She wasn't going to run. She was going to break into the most secure building in Manhattan, and if she got caught, she wouldn't just be fired. She would be dead or in jail. She pulled her hood tighter and stepped out into the rain. The waitress was gone. The victim was gone. The hacker was back. The service entrance of Hawthorne Dynamics was guarded by a biometric scanner and a solitary security guard named Old Stan, who spent most of his shifts watching baseball on his phone. Ophelia knew this because during her brief 48 hours as VP, she had memorized the building's security schematics while waiting for the elevator. She didn't have a badge anymore, but she had a spoofing device she had soldered together in the internet cafe, using parts from a dismantled gaming controller and a high-gain antenna. She crouched behind a dumpster in the pouring rain, water soaking through her hoodie. She held the device near the scanner. It cycled through frequencies, searching for the handshake signal. Beep. The light turned green. Ophelia slipped inside just as Stan looked up from his game. "Hey, who's there?" She didn't stop to chat. She sprinted toward the freight elevators, jamming the close door button. As the heavy steel doors slid shut, she heard Stan radioing for backup. "Intruder in Sector 4. Repeat, intruder." She had 5 minutes before the building went into full lockdown. Inside the elevator, she ripped off the maintenance panel. She couldn't go to the 60th floor. Desmond would have locked that down personally. She needed to go to the server core on the 30th floor, the physical heart of the beast. The elevator dinged. The hallway was bathed in emergency red light. The silence was eerie, broken only by the hum of the massive cooling units. Ophelia ran to the main terminal door, locked, maglock, unhackable from the outside without a physical key. "Think, Ophelia, think," she whispered, wiping wet hair from her face. She looked at the fire suppression panel next to the door. It was an analog override. If she triggered the halon gas system, the doors would automatically unseal to allow personnel to escape. It was dangerous. If she didn't hold her breath or put on a mask, the gas would displace the oxygen and knock her out in seconds. She didn't have a mask. "Sorry, lungs," she muttered. She smashed the glass on the fire panel and pulled the lever. Whoosh! A klaxon blared. The hiss of gas filled the corridor. The maglocks on the server room disengaged with a heavy thunk. Ophelia took a massive gulp of air, held it, and kicked the door open. She threw herself inside and slammed the manual override to seal the door behind her, shutting off the gas flow from the hallway. She gasped for air, coughing violently. She was in. The server room was a frozen cathedral of blinking lights. Rows of black towers stretched into the darkness, but the lights weren't blinking green. They were pulsing a fast, angry amber. She ran to the master console and plugged in her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keys. She pulled up the network traffic. It was worse than she thought. The data wasn't just leaking, it was hemorrhaging. 80% of Project Ether was already gone. And the kill switch, a logic bomb designed to wipe the servers clean after the theft, was armed to detonate in 3 minutes. If it went off, Hawthorne Dynamics wouldn't just lose data. The voltage spike would physically fry the hardware. The company would be ash. Come on, she hissed. She initiated a counter-protocol. She couldn't stop the upload. The connection was too fast, but she could poison the well. She started uploading junk data, terabytes of random noise disguised as blueprints to mix with the real files. It would take cross-industries years to sift through the garbage to find the real tech. 90% uploaded. Logic bomb. Timer. 90 seconds. Suddenly, the door behind her exploded. Ophelia screamed as the heavy steel door was blasted off its hinges. Smoke filled the room. Through the haze, armed private security contractors stormed in, laser sights sweeping the room. Hands in the air. Step away from the terminal. Ophelia raised her hands, but she didn't step back. I can't. It's going to crash. Step away, the lead guard shouted, aiming a rifle at her chest. Then a figure walked through the smoke. Desmond Hawthorne. He looked furious. His tie was gone, his shirt unbuttoned, his face a mask of betrayal. He held a pistol at his side. Ophelia, he said, his voice shaking with rage. I gave you a chance, and you come back to burn it down? I'm not burning it down, Ophelia yelled, tears mixing with the rain on her face. Look at the screen, Desmond. Look at the throughput. It's outbound. Someone is draining you dry. Yeah, you. Desmond stepped closer, raising the gun. Security confirmed you bypassed the locks. You triggered the fire alarm. You're a saboteur. If I wanted to destroy you, I would have let it happen from my apartment, she pleaded. I broke in to save you. Look at the destination IP. Trace it. It's not the Caymans. It's a localized relay. Desmond hesitated. He looked at the screen. Logic bomb timer. 45 seconds. Desmond, please, Ophelia begged. Trust me one last time. If I'm lying, you can shoot me. But if I'm right, and you pull me away from this keyboard, your company dies in 40 seconds. The room was silent. The guards looked at Desmond. Desmond looked at the waitress. The fraud. The liar. The genius. He saw the desperation in her eyes. It wasn't the look of a thief. It was the look of a protector. Stand down, Desmond ordered the guards. Sir? The lead guard questioned. She's a hostile. I said stand down, Desmond roared. He holstered his weapon and ran to the console next to her. What do you need? I need root access, Ophelia cried, typing furiously again. And I need you to authorize a voltage overdrive on the North Bridge. We have to short-circuit the external connection before the logic bomb triggers. That will blow the fuses, Desmond said, understanding immediately. Better the fuses than the hard drives, she countered. Do it, Desmond authorized. He typed in his alpha code. Authorization accepted. Hold on, Ophelia shouted. She hit enter. A massive spark showered from the ceiling. The lights in the server room exploded. The hum of the cooling fans died instantly. The room plunged into pitch blackness and silence. For 10 seconds, no one moved. Then, the emergency red lights flickered back on battery power. Desmond looked at the screen. It was dead. The servers were offline. Did it work? He whispered. Ophelia tapped the power button on her laptop, which was running on its own battery. She pulled up the diagnostic. System status, offline. Data integrity, 98% preserved. External connection, severed. Logic, bomb, neutralized. She slumped against the console, sliding down to the floor. We saved it. We saved the core. Desmond looked at the report. Then he looked down at Ophelia, who was shivering on the cold floor, soaked exhausted and surrounded by broken glass. He dropped to his knees beside her. He didn't say a word. He just pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her wet hair. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize yet," Ophelia murmured against his chest. "We still have to catch the bad guys." She pulled back and turned her laptop screen toward him. "I didn't just cut the connection," she said, a dangerous smile returning to her lips. "I backtraced the handshake. I know exactly where the data was going." She pointed to a map coordinates blinking on the screen. "It's not an office building," Desmond frowned. "That's a residential address." "It's a penthouse," Ophelia corrected. "Specifically, the penthouse of the Hotel Monarch." Desmond's eyes hardened into diamonds. "Bradford lives at the Monarch." "And guess who is staying in the presidential suite this week?" Ophelia asked. Desmond stood up, pulling Ophelia with him. "Gavin Cross." "Let's go get them," Desmond said. The penthouse of the Hotel Monarch was suspended above the city like a jewel box, detached from the grit and the rain of the streets below. Inside, the air smelled of expensive leather and aged oak. Bradford Halloway and Gavin Cross lounged on the Italian leather sofa, the sprawling lights of Manhattan visible through the floor-to-ceiling glass. On the marble coffee table between them sat a laptop, its screen glowing with a suspended progress bar. "It's stuck at 80%, Bradford noted, swirling the amber liquid in his crystal glass. There was a tremor in his hand that he couldn't quite suppress. 80% is enough, Gavin replied, his voice smooth and unbothered. He unbuttoned his tuxedo jacket, looking every inch the master of the universe. "We have the core schematics for the drone propulsion. By the time Hawthorne realizes what hit him, his servers will be slag, and his stock will be in freefall. We'll buy the scraps of his company for pennies on the dollar." Bradford laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. He clinked his glass against Gavin's. To Ophelia Bennett, the best scapegoat money didn't have to buy. She really was the gift that kept on giving. To the invisible woman, Gavin smirked, taking a slow sip. Boom! The sound wasn't a knock. It was an explosion of force. The double mahogany doors to the suite didn't just open. They splintered inward, the lock mechanism shearing off with a screech of tearing metal. Bradford jumped so violently he dropped his glass, the 20-year-old Scotch soaking into the Persian rug. Gavin stood up, his face draining of colour, the arrogance vanishing instantly. Desmond Hawthorne stepped through the ruin of the doorway. He looked nothing like the polished CEO who graced magazine covers. He was soaked to the bone, his white shirt stained with soot and clinging to his chest, his tie gone. His hair was plastered to his forehead, and his chest heaved with exertion. But it was his eyes that terrified them. They were dark, focused, and burning with a cold, predatory rage. Behind him, 4 NYPD officers fanned out into the room, hands on their holstered weapons. And then, stepping out from behind Desmond's shoulder, came Ophelia. She was wet, shivering, and looked exhausted, but her head was held high. She scanned the room, her gaze landing on the men who had tried to erase her existence. "Party's over, boys," Desmond said softly. The quietness of his voice was infinitely more terrifying than a shout. Gavin tried to rally. He straightened his spine, pulling a mask of indignation over his fear. "What is the meaning of this? You're trespassing, Hawthorne. I'll have you arrested for breaking and entering." "You can try," Ophelia said. Her voice was steady, cutting through the tension like a blade. She walked past the police, moving straight to the coffee table. She placed her battered, water-damaged laptop next to their sleek machine. "But I think the police are going to be much more interested in the polymorphic virus I found burrowing through the Hawthorne mainframe," she continued. "The one carrying a digital signature that matches the encryption keys on this laptop right here." "You can't prove that," Bradford stammered, backing away toward the balcony railing, his eyes darting between the officers and the exit. That was a hack. She planted it. She's a criminal." Ophelia opened a file on her screen. "Actually, Bradford, I proved a lot of things tonight. While I was scrubbing the servers to save Desmond's company, I found the access logs. You weren't very careful." She turned the screen so they could see the scrolling wall of text. "You used your old admin credentials to open the back door. You thought you were clever," she said, a small, cold smile touching her lips. "But you forgot one thing. The Valkyrie patch, the code I wrote 3 years ago that you mocked. It has a dormant security feature. It records every keystroke made by anyone attempting to modify the core kernel." Bradford's face went grey. "I have a log of you typing the command to upload the data to Cross Industries," Ophelia finished. "Every single keystroke." "I don't make mistakes," Bradford whispered, the denial weak on his lips. "You made one big one," Desmond interjected, stepping up beside Ophelia, his presence a protective wall. "You underestimated her." Ophelia then turned her gaze to Gavin, the man who had once promised to marry her, the man who had stolen her life. "And you, Gavin, this is the best part." She clicked a folder on her desktop named Project Genesis Recovery. "When I initiated the counter-hack tonight, I didn't just block the transfer. I reversed the flow. I went into your server, Gavin. The connection works 2 ways. Gavin's eyes widened in genuine horror. "What did you do?" "I took it back," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that echoed in the silent room. "My research. The quantum compression algorithm you stole from me 3 years ago. I downloaded the original metadata timestamps from your private archive, the ones that prove those files existed on my computer 6 months before you ever claimed to write them." She turned the laptop toward the lead police officer. "Officers, this drive contains proof of grand larceny, corporate espionage, and the forensic evidence needed to overturn my wrongful conviction for academic fraud." The lead officer nodded, his expression grim. "Mr. Cross, Mr. Halloway, please turn around and place your hands behind your back." The reality snapped Gavin's composure. The veneer of the billionaire playboy shattered. "No!" Gavin screamed. He lunged, not for the door, but for the laptop. He needed to destroy the drive. Desmond moved faster than thought. He intercepted Gavin halfway across the room. He didn't just block him. He slammed into him with the force of a freight train, driving him back onto the leather sofa. The impact rattled the floor-to-ceiling windows. Desmond pinned Gavin down, his forearm pressed against Gavin's throat. "Don't," Desmond warned, his voice a low growl close to Gavin's ear. "I have been waiting to do that for a week. Don't give me a reason to do it again." Gavin gasped for air, staring up into the eyes of a man who had stripped away all civilization. He went limp. Desmond stepped back, straightening his shirt, breathing hard. As the police handcuffed the 2 men and read them their rights, the room filled with the chaotic noise of justice. Bradford began to weep, shouting that Gavin had forced him, that he was a victim. Gavin remained silent, staring at Ophelia with pure, unadulterated hatred as he was marched out the door. And then, they were gone. The penthouse fell silent. The broken door hung off its hinges. The only sound was the wind whistling through the gap. Desmond walked out onto the balcony. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and cold. He gripped the railing, looking out over the glittering expanse of the city he had almost lost. Ophelia watched him for a moment, then followed. She stood beside him, the cold wind biting through her wet clothes. But she didn't feel the chill. She felt lighter than she had in years. "You really hacked his private server?" Desmond asked, breaking the silence. He didn't look at her yet. "I might have poked around a bit," she admitted, leaning her elbows on the railing. "He has terrible password hygiene." "Password 123?" It was almost insulting. Desmond let out a breath that turned into a laugh, a genuine, full-throated sound of relief that seemed to release the tension of the entire week. He turned to face her, the laughter fading into a look of intense, quiet emotion. He reached out, taking both of her cold hands in his warm ones. "Ophelia," he said, his voice rough. "I don't know how to fix this. I fired you. I humiliated you in front of the entire industry. I almost let them arrest you tonight." "You were protecting your company," Ophelia said softly. "I understand, Desmond. I lied to you about who I was. I gave you every reason to doubt me. Why didn't you tell me? That first day in the kitchen?" "Because I was broken," she whispered, looking down at their joined hands. "I thought Ophelia Vost was dead. I thought if I told you the truth, you would only see the scandal. You wouldn't see the coda. You wouldn't see me." Desmond released one of her hands to gently lift her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "I see the coda," he said firmly. "I see the genius who just saved my legacy when everyone else told me to give up." His thumb brushed her cheek, wiping away a smudge of soot. "And," he continued, his voice dropping to a murmur, "I see the woman I can't stop thinking about, the woman who walked into a burning server room for a man who didn't deserve it." Ophelia's breath hitched, her heart hammered against her ribs, louder than the city below. Is that a job offer?" "No." Desmond smiled, his eyes softening into a look of pure adoration. "The job offer is already sent to your email, Chief Technology Officer, with a 10% equity stake and a full legal team ready to clear your name tomorrow morning." "Then what is this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "This," Desmond said, leaning in until his forehead rested against hers, "is a merger." He kissed her. It wasn't tentative. It was electric, passionate and overwhelming. It tasted of rain and relief and a promise kept. High above the city, with the sirens fading in the distance and the skyline shimmering like diamonds, the Waitress and the Billionaire sealed the deal. Ophelia Bennett was gone. Dr. Ophelia Vost was back. And this time she wasn't invisible. She was the one running the world. Ophelia went from refilling water glasses to running the technology for the biggest company in the world, proving that true talent can't be buried forever. She didn't just fix a glitch. She fixed a broken system and took down the people who tried to destroy her. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the person you overlook is the only one who has the answer. What did you think of Desmond's reaction? Should he have trusted her sooner, or was he right to be suspicious? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. I've got an even crazier revenge drama coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching.